this video, we will be making this fabric basket with a cross-stitched message. This soft and flexible basket can be a fun addition to any Easter egg hunt. Note that this project does not require a sewing machine, but you will need a basic knowledge of sewing and cross-stitching. So let's get started by reviewing the supplies and tools we'll need. Aida cloth, cross-stitch hoop, embroidery floss, needles, stiffened felt, ruler, pen, scissors, triangle, craft knife and cutting mat, sewing pins, fabric, an iron, all-purpose thread, a heavy book, and ribbon. Step 1. Cross-stitch. We are going to begin this project by cross-stitching a pattern that will fit inside of a 2" by 6" rectangle. I'm using a 14 count Aida cloth cut into a 10" by 10" square and centered on an 8" cross-stitch hoop. I'm going to stitch a nice Happy Easter message along with a cute little Easter egg, but feel free to use this space to write a name or personalized message. Again, I'm not going too much into the details on how to cross-stitch because that could be a video all on its own, and there are many videos on YouTube that will do a better job of explaining it than I could. Step 2. Trim Aida cloth. Remove your cross-stitched pattern from its ring. Determine the center point of your pattern both vertically and horizontally by measuring its total length and width and dividing by 2. Mine is located right at the bottom of this letter P. When you find your center point, measure 2 inches up and 2 inches down and mark the cloth with your pen. Rotate your ruler and then measure and mark out 4 inches to the left and 4 inches to the right. Extend the lines of your mark so that you have an 8" by 4" rectangle with your stitch perfectly centered in the middle. Then trim the Aida cloth along these lines. Step 3. Cut felt. Now we are going to measure and cut our 3 sheets of stiffened felt. The first will be the round base of our basket. I like to use the inside of my cross-stitch hoop as a stencil, but you can use any circle stencil you want as long as it's about 7½ inches in diameter. Cut the felt along your guide and set aside. For our next 2 sheets, we are going to draw guides at 6" and 8" and then cut along those guides with our scissors. Do this to both sheets to create 2 6" by 12" pieces and 2 2" by 12" pieces. You can discard the 1" by 12" pieces. Finally, we are going to cut a little window into just one of our 6" by 12" felts. Take a triangle and find the center point along the long edge and make a mark. Then do the same 3 inches to the left and 3 inches to the right. Rotate your triangle and draw marks at 1" and 3". Repeat on the sides and then connect the guides to create a 2" by 6" window that our cross-stitch message will appear in. Lay your felt onto a cutting mat and carefully cut the window out with the craft knife. Step 4. Iron and cut fabric. If your fabric has wrinkles or fold lines, take a few minutes to iron them out. Fabric is sold in a variety of sizes, from full-on rolls that are priced by the yard to pre-cut sheets. I also like to have both an inside and outside pattern to give the basket variety, but you can choose any fabric color or pattern you want. In total, you will need 4 pieces cut into 11" by 16" rectangles and 2 11" by 11" squares. Step 5. Sew base. Take your square sheets of fabric and sandwich your felt circle between them with 2 sewing pins. With your fabric scissors, cut off the excess and leave about a 1" border around your felt circle. Also make sure that if your fabric has a pattern, that the outside is facing the correct way. Next, we are going to switch to a much smaller embroidery needle and a thinner all-purpose sewing thread and begin to sew our felt circle in place. Make sure that the thread color you use matches the outside color of the basket. I also fold the fabric slightly over the felt with the outside color facing out so that I can see exactly where I'm sewing. This will help later when connecting the sides. When done, remove the pins and set aside. Step 6. Sew fabric around window. Place your felt with the window cut out on your table, making sure that the side with any pen markings is facing down. Then take a sheet of outside fabric and lay it on top so that there's about a 1" overhang on the bottom. Center the fabric horizontally until the overhanging sides are about even. When satisfied, pin it all in place so that nothing shifts around, and flip the fabric and felt over. Next, cut a tiny horizontal slit in the middle of the fabric in the window, and extend it until you get about a ½ inch away from the side edges. Then carefully cut a diagonal towards the corner, but don't get too close. Flip it over again and then tuck the fabric under the edge of the felt and backstitch it starting from the middle and going around. You might find it easier to do this over the edge of a table and placing a heavy book on top to hold it down. Pull the fabric taut, and as you get closer and closer to the corner, you can carefully trim the diagonal more, but remember not to go all the way. At the very corner, loop the thread around a few times so that you pull the fabric back into a V. Then continue down the other edges and looping around the other corners. Eventually, you will come back around to where you started and have a nice little window with clean edges. Step 7. Sew message to window. Now that the felt and fabric are firmly connected, we can attach our cross-stitch message, so unpin the 2 middle pins and lay the message right side up underneath the window. Center it exactly where you want it, and when satisfied, pin it. Now we are going to sew the Aida cloth in place to the felt, and only the felt, by gently lifting them up from the outside cloth and following the lines of the Aida cloth with our thread, removing the pins one section at a time. Again, you might find this a lot easier to do over the edge of a table, where the fabric can hang down. When done, trim any excess off, but don't get too close to your stitch since Aida cloth does fray at the edges sometimes. Step 8. Prep sides. Take your inside fabric and lay it down on the table. If it has a pattern printed on it, you want the side that is supposed to show face down. Then lay your front felt, fabric, and message panel on it facing upwards. Make sure that the bottom lines up and pin it in place in several locations, and put vertical pins on the sides where the felt ends. Repeat this process for the back. Lay your inside fabric down, then the felt, centered and leaving that 1-inch bottom, then the outside fabric, and pin it all together. Step 9. Connect sides to base. To connect the sides of your basket to the base, place your front panel flat on the table facing upward. Then take your base and flip it so that the inside fabric is facing upwards as well. Then line up the base's circular felt with the edges of the side's rectangular felt so that they meet at a tangent in the middle. Now we are going to sew these two pieces together, starting from the middle of our side and working outwards. Note that this will be very awkward the first few stitches as you try to make the two felt pieces continually line up. Use the same thread and follow the same stitch line you made when you sewed the base. Work your way all the way around until you reach the end of your side's felt edges. Do not continue to sew for now. We will close this up later. Just stop and go in the other direction. Once the front panel is sewn, line up the opposite side of the base with the middle of the back panel and repeat the same process. When done, you will have the sides hanging down with excess fabric off to the sides. Step 10. Sew up sides. Now we are going to connect the front and back panels at the sides. Turn to one of the sides and make sure that all the fabric is pulled outward. Then loosely pinch the fabric together so that the two edges of the felt are almost touching. Place a few pins to hold in place and then do the same on the other side. Before we start sewing, trim the excess fabric so that it's not in the way. Sew the side up using the same color thread that matches the outside, starting from the bottom. Put a few extra threads right where the bottom and side meet to make sure that there will be no gaps when we invert. When you get about 1 inch from where the felt is about to end, switch the color of your thread to something that's going to match the inside fabric. This section might be seen when we invert. Continue stitching until you get to the top. Repeat this process on both sides. Step 11. Neaten seams. So before we can invert, we need to clean up the edges of our seams. Starting with the base, trim the excess fabric so that there's about 1/2 inch remaining. Then carefully fold the two outer fabrics inward so that the edges are sandwiched in between, and sew this up using a matching thread all the way around. This is going to be super tedious, but the effort you put in now will make the basket look super neat and hold strong. Once you are done, repeat this process up the sides. Don't forget to remove pins. Step 12. Invert basket. Bend the base of the circle loosely in half but do not crease it. Gently push it up while also pulling the sides of the basket downward until the basket pops back in place with the correct side facing out. Then adjust all the felt and fabric so that nothing is bent or shifted. Step 13. Fold the top down. Gently fold the excess fabric over the top edge of the basket's felt. Make sure that all the fabric is taut and even. Then take one of your 2-inch by 12-inch felt pieces and feed it into the space between the inside and outside fabrics. Depending on how well it fits, you might need to trim the ends. Then repeat on the other side. Tuck the remaining excess over the edge. Step 14. Add ribbon handle. Take your ribbon and spool out about 4 feet. Then fold that piece in half and cut with a pair of scissors so that you have 2 2-foot long pieces. Match them up back to back so that the insides face each other. Fold down the tips and sew the ribbons together up the sides. I'm using a running stitch here, but you can use whatever stitch you like. You can also choose the thickness of your ribbon. Mine is 7 1/8 inch thick, but you can use one that's thinner or thicker. When done, you'll have one long double-sided ribbon handle ready to sew on. On one of the sides of your basket, tuck the end of your handle underneath the fold and sew it into place. I like to sew it all the way through where it meets the top edge of the basket, but then sew it only to the flap as I work my way down. Then do the same on the other side. Remember that you can adjust the handle length to be slightly longer or shorter depending on your preference. When done, retuck any fabric that might have come loose while adding the handles. And that's how you make this cross-stitched fabric basket. Fill it up with Easter treats or use it on any egg hunt. With your choice of fabric, ribbon, and stitching, your basket can truly be one of a kind. If you have an Instagram or Twitter, send me pics of your creations. I'd love to see your work.